My name's Donna Donahue. I am the dyslexic mother of 3 dyslexic children, and I have been here at the CDC for, started in 2000 as a tutor. So to be a tutor at the Dyslexia Center, you have to take training. So my oldest daughter couldn't read a thing. She's the 2nd grade, couldn't read the word the, couldn't read the word and, she couldn't read anything. And I found her help in 2nd grade, and she just took off. She always had stories in her head. She always had a book in her hand. She just took off and has done fabulously. My son, who was next, couldn't read, but had a phenomenal memory. So he got to about 3rd grade just memorizing words. But if you asked him, if you showed him the letter A and asked him what it said, he would have no idea. But he could memorize a word. So he did well because of his memory. But I knew he was starting to lose interest in school and starting to get angry. So I literally lived right down the street. I'd moved back from Connecticut and lived right down the street. And somebody said, I don't know, the Masons are doing something with dyslexia. So I called, and she said, if you come and take the training to be a tutor, your son will jump the wait list, which we don't do that anymore. So okay. So if you talk to anybody about the center, we don't jump people on the wait list, kids on the wait list anymore. But so I said, I'm an architect. You don't want me teaching reading, because I knew I had my own issues with it, with dyslexia. And she said, no, you'll be great. Come up. And so everybody was a teacher around the table, and they're all going, oh, I'm a teacher, and they're writing dyslexia is, and I'm sitting there going, oh my God, there I am. There's my dad. There's my mom. So dyslexia is genetic. It's neurobiological, so it has to do with the way the neurons are moving in your brain. It's in the 2nd month of uterus, so you don't become dyslexic, you are dyslexic. So I always ask, anybody in the audience know they're dyslexic, or think they're dyslexic, or know of a dyslexic? And nobody usually raises their hand at this point. And then by the time I'm done talking, everybody's like, it's me. And I speak to groups of Masons, typically older, and at the end of the lecture, they always think they are. You can't become dyslexic. You either are or you aren't. And born dyslexic, die dyslexic, you can be remediated. So when I got great grades in school, because I had that memory past tense, that memory that my son had. But when I got to architecture school, literally, I remember where I was sitting, where it was like my brain exploded, because everything was 3-dimensional. So I would draw a floor plan, and I knew what the ceiling was going to look like, where other people in my class, they're like, how do you do that? I'm like, oh, I don't know. Because 3-dimension made sense to me. 2-dimension didn't make sense to me. So there are positives. We don't want to try and cure dyslexia. It's not a disease. We want to teach them how to read. So there's a dichotomy in a dyslexic brain. You get a bright mind that's struggling. So there are kids who learn to read that don't have bright minds, but they learn to read. There are kids that like dyslexics, have bright minds and struggle terribly, even without ADHD. Can comprehend language beautifully, but can't read the words and comprehend what they're reading. There are dyslexics that read beautifully, but can't spell to save their life. I always say, is there anybody in the family that gets lost in a paper bag, gets in the elevator and has to think about how to get out of it, because we have directional issues typically. My problem with the drawings in architecture was right and left. I don't know my right from my left. So do you have that? Yeah. So I always have to do this. I write with my right hand. I always have to, someone will say turn right, and I'll be driving, I'll go, that's this one. East and west, forget it. That makes no sense to me at all. Yeah.
I had a problem with directions, but this was always ring finger, watch hand.
Yeah. So what we do in the Dyslexia Center is kids come to the center having been tested. Now here's the problem. Most psychologists don't know what dyslexia is. So years ago, a psychologist from the Dayton Children's called me and said, so tell me how to diagnose it. I'm like, really? That's like somebody calling me and saying, tell me how to build a building. I'm like, why don't you know that? Isn't that what you learn to do? no one, just psychologists, very few know what dyslexia is when they see it. They don't know how to identify it. And they aren't doing the right test to identify it. So in order to find a hidden strength, which dyslexics have this ability to listen to language, so you remove the squiggles that we call words, and they can understand language, but they can't read it typically. But there's all sorts of profiles for dyslexia, but that's a big one. So if you don't test to what should be a strength, you never see the strengths, you just see the lows, right? So for about the first 8 or 9 years, the psychological evaluations did not have the word dyslexia on them at all, and that's my job, is to look through the profile and see if I see a dyslexic child. They won't let me meet the children because they know I'd take everybody, you know, because I know what we do would help everybody, so why wouldn't I take them? So occasionally we'll get a child that has a medical issue, and that's why they aren't reading, and I go to Neil Smalley, and I don't know if any of you know him, but I have told him, if you leave, I'm leaving. So every board meeting he goes, "Hey Donna," and I'm like, "No, I'm not ready, you can't leave yet." Neil, I'll say, "Neil, I know we can help him. Not dyslexic, but I know we can help him," and he lets me take him. So, but for the most part, we are a center for dyslexia. We are one of, I think 50 now, maybe a little less. They're closing them because we don't ask anybody to pay. So we have to get funding, but all of the sources are going up, right? And because we're a Masonic group, we don't get much funding. So we rely on groups like you, we rely on Masons, we tap the poor Masons out. But we give them a good name too, so that's a good thing. So right now at the Learning Center, you apply with testing. I accept you or not. Okay. And then you go on a wait list. We have a 2-year wait. I have about anywhere between 11 and 14 tutors. It's a lot of work. Each lesson is individualized to that child, so it takes the tutors about 1.5 hours to 2 hours to create the lesson plan, and then 1 hour to teach. The kids are here twice a week for 2 years. So it's a 2-year maximum. Not everybody's here for 2 years, but it's a 2-year maximum. So then we graduate them. We hope to get them on their feet, teaching them how to read, and then they have to practice. It's like any sport. They don't practice, you know, all the strategies we teach are gone. So, but it's a fabulous place. So I don't know when I will exit. I guess it depends on Neil, but you know, my family's always like, "Aren't you done with that?" I'm like, "No, I still really enjoy it." So it's a full-time job for me, with less than part-time pay and no benefits. So it's one of those, but it's great. So are there any questions? I know my time is running out here.
I just want to mention that my wife's niece didn't know she was dyslexic until college.
Yeah, that's not uncommon.
Once she went and got it corrected, she aced her college classes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because the grade schools and the high schools have no incentive to identify you, so they try not to. "Oh, Miss Donahue, we don't use the D word," and I'm thinking of all the bad words. I'm like, which one is that bad with the D, you know? But we come with a price tag on our head. But when we get to college, they have it's not a price tag for them. You got to figure it out yourself. You're in college. But they'll say, "Has no one ever told you you're dyslexic?" We have so many, and we're kindergarten through 12th grade.
Is that considered a developmental disability?
It is, yes. And having said that, it is not that you develop into it. Most people think that the development there means you develop into it. Yeah, it's the only solution. It's not a cure. The only solution is education. It's it.